I'm going to go through strata of future, and I'm going to go well, I'm going to start with pop material. I'm going to try to avoid philosophy, at least in the beginning, you know, because it's live presentation, so it needs to be lighter. And apparently future has been interesting collective interest for like centuries, basically. But it came in waves. The interest for future is coming in waves, and right now the swarm school and discussion that we have also shows that future is again very hot topic. Of course, it's present in popular culture. It's mostly dystopic, but what I'm interested in is image of future, methodology of future thinking, futurity, if you like, that happened in 60s, the wave, not from today, but from 60s and early 70s. That was very interesting and pretty fruitful period where future was present and part of scientific discussions, pseudo-scientific discussions, geopolitical discussions, political strategies, and so on. So here, this is paper, Deterministic Non-Periodic Flow by Edward Lawrence, published in Journal for Atmospheric Science. So basically, this is meteorological model shown here, and this published in 1963, and from this meteorological model emerged the theory of chaos, basically, you know, the butterfly effect, as it's known in popular culture, and it targets on limits of determinant future, our limits of knowledge, and it tackles uncertainty that was, well, part of all future-oriented discourses, including this one. This is the framework for speculation on the next 33 years, published by Hermann Kahn and Wiener, not Norbert, but the other guy. And that book is very interesting because it's based on not on mathematical models, but on scenario renderings, different discussions between intellectuals, geostrategists, even writers, artists within the RAND Corporation, which actually served American military at the time. Of course, this is Dr. Strangelove from Stanley Kubrick's famous movie. This main character is actually modeled well in relation to this Hermann Kahn, one of the ideologists of this future scenario methodology brought in this book. Also in architecture and history of design, there are many works on future. One of the most maybe important ones is Charles Jenk's The Prediction and Methods Architecture 2000, which of course rendered another model of very organic future predictions of future movements and tendencies in next, well, 30 years or so. So each methodology was presented through a specific model of future, but also model to think future, model to think through, to reach future. However, definitely the most influential book of the time, and we are talking about like second half of the 60s and early 70s, is The Limits to Growth. The Limits to Growth is work by a think tank, just like RAND Corporation that I just mentioned, This was another think tank. It was a group of industrialists, scientists, thinkers, philosophers, engineers who discussed about future of humanity. And they started in, I think, 1968 in Rome, starting with the Club of Rome. And their methodology entirely shifted to another level when J. Forrester, MIT professor and father of system dynamics, joined them. So J. Forrester came up after a meeting with a model. This quite famous model is called the World 3 model, that cybernetically connected population, so global population, food production, renewable resources extraction, and industrial production. So we would say that it combined cumulative big data of the time in order to predict future, to predict the way where the world is going to go in next period, not 30 but 100 years. And that image was pretty catastrophic, really catastrophic. Algorithm written behind this model, because this is just like a diagram, and there was like mathematical algorithm that computer algorithm basically that runs statistics and produce the image of reality. That's one of the earliest examples of mathematical computer models running this very complex cybernetic system. It predicted a collapse, like total collapse of global environment, a collapse of global economic system, and total depletion of population. It was so dark. The vision was so dark that the second edition of the book had to be brightened up a bit lighter. You know, they corrected some stuff in the second edition. However, in 2012, researchers at the University of Melbourne rerun data. So they updated data from the original model, and they used our current, basically, data of the same categories: population, food production, industrial production, extraction of non-renewable resources, and they came up with even more stressful conclusion. They concluded that World 3 model was absolutely 100% correct. As you can see, this is environment. This is existing data. This is data, so you can see here 2020, 1980, so until like approximately here, data is from the original book, and here is projection on the new data. Food, birth rate, and so on. So they did another model, or name of that model. So World 3 in this new catastrophic, again rationally, empirically proven and backed projection is called not World 3, but business as usual, or BAU. So this is the model. If we continue to do business as usual, this is what is going to happen. Of course, we can call it Anthropocene, or we can open up a spectrum of different scenes that will resonate with these statistics. However, that's not my point. My point is to go back one step and re-examine who made that vision, institutionally, politically, and even financially. And there was the industry behind the original study, huge industries. And the biggest benefactor, the most important and most, open-handed grant was given by Das Auto, Volkswagen. So Volkswagen sponsored the limits to growth. That would be, of course, not so important, because we learned yesterday that in industry was always sponsoring new research, and it's like at MIT that's usual practice. But as you know, Volkswagen is going through very interesting and turbulent period right now. Apparently, they were accused, not accused, but it's proven, it's a fact, that they intentionally programmed turbocharged direct injection in diesel motors to activate their emission controls during the laboratory emission testing, which caused the vehicles to output to meet US standards. So they emit 40 times more in reality. Of course, this is quite shocking, because they were pretty much aware, like last almost 50 years, they were aware of the main problem that will push the world to its like collapse, and which is pollution and extraction of non-renewable resources. But still, knowing that, they still did an interesting cybernetic loop within within their own system in order to earn money. A few days ago, of course, they sold this this technology to other corporations. Audi used it as well, and this guy was arrested a few days ago, so 18th of June 2018. So this is very fresh data. So basically, we're talking about one streamline of the future. One streamline of the future that, well, it requires a bit theoretical understanding. What happened there, what is connected to what, and how this image of the future is produced. So I'm going back to early 70s and late 60s in Yugoslavia. For me, it was quite shocking, but in Herceg-Novi, which is currently in Montenegro, there was a conference, a forecasting of the future. Huge international conference that gathered cyberneticians, artists, architects, different scientists from both sides of the Iron Curtain in discussion about, well, methodologies of future prediction. And the whole conference was opened by this guy here, Abraham Moll, who is, theoretician of not visual arts, but visuality, let's say, and also cybernetician. And he opened up the whole conference with his talk, Axiomatics and Methodology of the Future. And the whole introduction was based on this incredible model. So he said that past and future are not separated with the thin line. So there is no thin line between future and past. The present is not a line. There is a certain thickness of now. There is a certain thickness of here and now, of time and space, right? And from this point, the thickness of now, we keep projecting images of the future, right? And those images influencing our here and now, our thickness of future. And thickness changes. Of course, meaning environment changes, perception changes. So basically, this model has very serious environmental implications. And by looking at this, for me, incredibly important model, we can ask who set out these images of the future. And we can, again, think about the limits to growth, which I have here, the original publication. We can ask, okay, who launched this image of future, and how we should work with it. So this actually image of future, that the limits to growth, functions as a future that is hegemonically set out, that is set out beyond our control. You know, future that is imminent, that will happen no matter what. Future that is out of our control entirely. And because it's out of our control, of course, future becomes a container, a space that will be filled anyways, whether we like it or not. So my question was how to think future beyond dominant narratives of the future. How to think future out of the center. How to decentralize future. How to multiply future. How to open up these several lines of future thinking. And how to establish a certain network between peripheries of future. So avoiding the dominant future narratives, which of course function as, well, self-fulfilling prophecies, not future images, but really prophecies that came true, was the topic and is the point from which I'm going to discuss about other publication, other book, which I brought here. But before that, I want to address not imaginary, but no, not imagination, but imaginary. So meaning social context, collective mind that produced that publication that I'm going to talk about. And that collective mind in the end of 60s in Yugoslavia again was very interesting. Yugoslavia was leader of non-aligned movement, and in late 60s and early 70s there was an international art movement called New Tendencies, which actually introduced computers and cybernetics to art. They published magazines like Bit International. They discussed many things, including dialogue with machine. They collaborated with engineers and scientists, and actually that was a very fruitful moment because political and ideological framework of Yugoslavia at that time, which was self-management, so it's Marxist idea of self-management, was absolutely fitted into the cybernetic idea of self-regulation, systemic self-regulation. And from this political moment, ideological, historical and cultural moment, this publication emerged. So this publication, which is the publication that I have here in the envelope, is interesting because it's the very counterpoint to the limits to growth. It's absolute counterpoint to it. Unlike Limits to Growth, that was published in like millions of copies and translated to dozens of languages globally, and it's keep being republished all the time. This book is published in just a couple of copies, and when I say couple of copies, I mean like 4 copies in total. This is archive material that I'm talking about here. Absolutely underground, unknown material that I'm going to show you right now. And it's produced by an architect, an urban planner called Branko Petrović, who was a very interesting figure. He was one of the founders of Institute of Urban Planning in Zagreb. He moved to Ethiopia in '62, where he became one of the most important person for planning and territorial organization in Ethiopia. And he returned to Yugoslavia with a special award medal given by Haile Selassie in 1969, and he returned and started working on a new project. So this is his project, Systematization of the Phenomenon of Human Environment. And this study starts, it's opened by this quote. So he said, what we need today is completeness and complexity, from material to immaterial, from physical to psychical, from function to abstraction, from present to futurological forms, from reality to fantasy and imagination. This was ideologically a counterpoint to Limits to Growth, book that or project that was based on rational, reproducible algorithms, mathematical formulas that run the whole image of the future, that render the image of the future. Unlike that book, this red book was based on really imagination of one guy, an imaginary of the social imaginary of the political moment in Yugoslavia, but also broader trends and broader streams of environment and ecology globally at the time. Why I'm bringing this at the first place? Because this book, the red book, has 36 diagrams that explain the whole system of human environment and that project future of human environment. And this is one of the diagrams from the book. So it has subject in the center, though not global population, but the subject. We can debate, is that subject human or non-human? Of course, that's another step of our discussion, but it's not definitely big data that is behind or in the center. And also, as you can see, unlike a World 3 diagram, it's not hyper-connected, because not everything needs to be connected with everything else. This diagram thinks beyond cybernetic, closed cybernetic systems and closed cybernetic loops. And that's very crucial to point out. Just like swamps that are brought to the system, but that are, some organic interruption in the circuits of cybernetic thinking, systemic thinking, Branko Petrović also proposed a diagram that, interestingly enough, corresponds to this project. He said he brought perception, human perception. He brought tones, noise, color, light, olfactory impulses, visual impulses, to the overall image that produces human environment, or interactions of the functional components of human environment, to be more precise. He brought artistic elements, philosophy, technology, social and biological elements to it. So this was much more sophisticated, but also not hyper-connected image of human environment and how we should think about it. He also discussed evolution of human environment and eras that through which we reached the problematic point where we might easily, collapse. He distinct first nature, second nature, third nature, and fourth nature. So there are several natures in his narrative, and of course that nature is in constant balance with technology. He's not separating technology and nature because he's not the traditionalist in his conception of nature. He's doing this diagram, which is a balance, environmental balance. He's weighting, he's weighting masses, different organic and non-organic masses, different human impacts and beyond human impacts, in order to come up with the third mass, this very organic, amoebic object or surface that is actually under influence of climatic changes, human systems, built environments, and so on. So this is basically dialectic, if you like, model of how nature is produced, reproduced, balanced, and thrown out of this balance all the time. It was mentioned yesterday when we talked about indigenous technologies and indigenous relation to the future, about this very problematic balance and our own Western perception of that balance. And of course, our perception, Western perception, is corrupted by technology, always. And this technological medium, as Branko Petrović defined it, is extremely interesting, because it's rendered not through technological innovations only, but also through the shifts in human perception and our personal perception. So this is perception here, this is natural systems, and this is like human systems, and these human system is like a filter that moves in perspective, and this perspective here is time, right? So he's defining several, periods of technology. Here he has mechanization, automatization, computerization, cybernetization, and scientification, science, technology, or era dominated by science. But actually he's thinking beyond that. So right now we are here. He left this space open for something that is still beyond his knowledge in late 60s, early 70s. And this is very interesting, this emptiness, empty space is like rooted beyond science, beyond the rational thinking, beyond empirical knowledge, beyond circuits and systems and cybernetics. This is one of the most recent, I think it's published in late May or something, May 4, issue of Science magazine. And the issue is open with the article, "Has artificial intelligence became alchemy?" So science is re-questioning science or scientific thinking, because artificial intelligence became so sophisticated, so black boxed in a way, that it's impossible for scientists to reproduce their own experiments, because the results are always different in radical and unexpected ways. So technology became more than technology. So when I say that we actually entered a very slippery terrain beyond the scientific thinking or rational thinking or systemic thinking, I'm not talking just about the era of post-truth, but also about science that creates post-scientific terrain. And this post-scientific terrain is a speculative terrain. This is terrain that we are immersed in right now in this pavilion. Now I'm talking about swamp here. Swamp is, here. After we jump from the edge of science, we enter swamp. Between science and post-science, between nature and culture, between air and water and land. But of course, and this is maybe my favorite diagram from the study, time in the overall equation plays a central role. For Branko Petrović, time is not a linear construct. It's not, exponential growth. It's not about like one line that just grows, or one timeline from which we can, rationally follow the future. No, time here is much more. There are several timelines, and actually they are not lines at all. They are curves. So he's he built this like 3D-dimensional, well, sculptural diagram that defines biological time, administrative time, planner's time, calendar time, technological time, historical time, climatic time, again technological, and so on. So there are multiplicity of times. There is simultaneity of time, bifurcation of time. This is a topological model of time, not a flat timeline where we can mark our progress of Western society, but not even circular time. This time is really a topology. It's a spatial construct in a way. But it's incredibly important for us today to debate and to really dig into this model, because when we talk about swamp, when we talk about interspecies or more than human ontologies, we really can take not calendar time or planner's time, but we can take biological time. Or we can take climatic time. It's somewhere here, I guess. Here. You know, and we can follow up entirely new time curves that meet and encounter other time curves, that goes through other time curves and meet into something that Branko Petrović calls moments. So moments are time and space constructs where different time curves intersect. This is another version of the same diagram. So here he puts the moment in the center, right? And all time curves are radially, spread from that moment. This moment here is actually a specific site. From, the practice of public art, we are always dealing with specificity of site. It's not just specificity of site, the site is always strata of different layers. And these layers are not just ecological layers, geopolitical layers, they're also time layers. Not in archaeological sense, but in sense of really understanding with what species or with specificities of time are we dealing with when we dig deep into with our projects. This is operative model. Of course, the most, the greatest number of diagrams in this book are related to space, because he was an architect. I'm going to bring up just three diagrams. So this one is extremely interesting and a bit funny, because these are time scales. He goes from sola, which means a room, over apartment, street, village, city, region, continent, planet, and cosmos. So this is a cosmology of time in a way. And also we can debate about like bringing time and space together in maybe another model that is yet to be made, yet to be think of and designed. We can debate how these scales pulsate when we think about specific site, right? How we change and how we slide to different scales. Maybe there should be another, even smaller, even on micro level, nano level space that we are, as humans, not able to tap in from the tools that we have right now as architects. This is dynamic closed technospace. Basically, this is a biosphere here, and this capsule here is dynamic capsule. It's closed, and it moves through this biosphere. So this space is actually space of infrastructure, space of logistics, but also information sphere, social networks. We are encapsulated and we travel from one point to another in this matter. We can again think about what is this matter. Can we, imagine a swampy environment around, as we, heard from you an hour ago, or like what is this biomatter around this dynamic, closed, techno space in which we actually dwell in. Frankly, I don't know what it is. Interactions of ecosystem and human systems, but there are, yeah. This is indicators of evolution of social medium. By going through different time curves and different spatial scales, we can really rethink what is social medium and what is social, what contains, how it's constructed in this new imaginary. Of course, one of the most important elements here is self-management. Of course, it resonates with the historic moment, but it also resonates with many things that are going on, like alternative networks and so on. And not just alternative networks of humans, but also other than humans. And finally, the question is, what is human? What is anthropo in this scene that has been created here? Where is anthropo? This is Homo effluviens. Of course, Homo effluviens has huge butt because the guy is sitting all day long, right? Like we do here in Swamp Pavilion. His muscles are completely, non-existing basically because, he doesn't need his muscles because everything is here. And his testicles are not big because he's using them too much, but because they're dysfunctional because of the, ecological condition. Of course, his lungs are atrophied, non-functional or semi-functional. And the most interesting part for me is, of course, his finger, number 1. Speculative casuists, forefinger. And there is a quote about it. He said, the Homo effluviens has a huge finger because he's using it for clicking buttons, and I would add swiping, because I quote, this is his main activity. 1971. Homo effluviens. Effluviens, as you can assume, is flow, toxic flow. No? So we can debate what is flow here in context or from position of swampy ontology. What is toxic flow? Is there a toxic flow, or is there just a flow that we have to deal with? Right? This is not image, this is reflection. This is mirror. I don't want to say black mirror, but definitely mirror. And to wrap it up, just to mention my project that I'm working on right now. So this is the original material. This is the format. More than 300 pages of, well, not just diagrams, but also text, different ideas, references. There is a discourse about these diagrams, of course. The next step is to open this very rare archive material to other brains, to you guys, and to transform it into a platform of future thinking, a platform of speculation. Because my interpretation of those diagrams is my interpretation. You can bring your own points of view, your own ideas, your own speculative, trajectories intertwined or energized through the models. So I'm treating this book, this study, as a device, really as almost as an alien technology that should be appropriated and reactivated and repositioned in the current context. How it will end up, I don't know. But really I observe it as a model. Donna Haraway said that model is a work object. A model is not the same kind of a thing as a metaphor or analogy. A model is worked and it does work. A model is like a miniature cosmos, as you were able to see, yeah? In which biologically curious as in Wonderland can have tea with the Red Queen and ask how this world works, even as she is worked by the complex enough, simple enough world. So this is open up structure. And with very unpredictable results. Now, I wanted to bring it up from archives from 60s and somehow launch it to potential futures, decentralized futures. Thank you.
As probably many of us, I thought, what did you mention in these schemes? And I remember that you remember from the cartoon about Homer Simpson, there is one very scientific this guy who always tries to elaborate something new and predict future. And what he doesn't like, I remember, three things: love, war, and drugs. I would say this is very essential, because many of them didn't mention war as a very important element, because they are scientists, they are not involved in this talk of wars. The second, that this scenario, enlarge your penis and to go to fitness clubs, that's it's not, as well not for scientists, and but those who are involved by the mythology, fitness club and enlarge your penis, they are rather considered to be Hercules than this one, the last. It means completely different mythology related to the sex, sexual relationships. And the third, it's about drugs, that's what does mean drugs in not only in the hallucinatory or marijuana sense, I mean as well as pharmacy drugs, but which is not related to contemporary analytics, social critics. They found that our pharmacy is not about health, it's about drugs users, how to develop them dependent, and it means that drugs are not involved into rational sense, but in some drug users' psychedelic sense. So three things: love and sex, war and drugs. Why they don't analyze them? Or maybe I do mistake.
Actually, all three elements are part of the book. They're addressed not through diagrams, but they're mentioned of several occasions in the text. Also, there are many interesting things that, of course, are not mentioned. One of them is glossary of terms. He made like 5 or 6 pages of just like new terms, including war, including sex, including drugs, including planetary engineering, and so on. Some terms that like very hot right now. So they're part of the whole thing, but they're not so pushed in front through diagrams. And there is another reason, which is also a very interesting fact. So this really crazy publication was not made by the lunatic on LSD. It's made by the well, architect who worked for the Ministry of Engineering and communal affairs on a republic level. So basically, this publication is published by Ministry, which adds another layer of complexity to its craziness. And totally not related to your question, the guy from Simpsons, the guy that dreadlocks, crazy scientist, is actually model of a real person, a friend of a guy who made Simpsons, and his reference, the real guy in real life, is Sanford Quinter. That's the underground info. That guy is modeled by Sanford Quinter, or towards Sanford Quinter. So yeah, well, one professor and theoretician of architecture with a similar hair. Okay, someone else? Something else?
Maybe just a quick question. I wonder if there's a difference in your study of methodologies for the future in looking at models or diagrams.
Can you speak up?
Sorry. I wonder if there's a difference in the methodology for the future in looking at models or diagrams and whether they do different kinds of work. A model potentially as limits to growth was using it is quite a kind of calculative, rationalistic way of projecting the future based on a certain way of understanding evidence and projecting, and a diagram is creating kinds of relations that might suggest a more effective or atmospheric way of understanding future. So is there a difference there, or am I maybe projecting?
No. I totally agree with you. The relation, there is a triangle between object, diagram, and a model. And we dealt with this triangle for semesters at MIT within our class. We have different models of this triangle. And yeah, I would definitely say that in the end, model is something in which you can pour data and that will render something. But diagram is more sketchy, more open, more mental. It's a mental model. Diagram is a mental model, and model, it's more precise. Model is more reflects more something that exists and maybe still not exist, and it produces reality. Of course, diagrams are also tools to produce or influence realities, but in a different way, on a different level, like maybe in some kind of mental sphere. That would be my interpretation, even though, of course, models and diagrams collide, because model 3 is a diagram of a model. So there is an algorithm behind it, but it's a diagram. But there are no algorithms behind any of these models here, right? This is not computable material. And one of the projects that I'm dealing with right now is how to include what type of computability can be, if this material, if this book is a device, what type of computability should be attached to it, and what data streams should be, plugged in, and what should be results. It's very speculative idea that really questions the very notion of computability. And again, on the upper logical level, this relation between object, diagram, and model.
I wonder how much time in the book that Bojić is spending on explaining actually these diagrams, because I don't know, maybe it's because of reading a lot of VM, but these diagrams, they really look like mandalas, and it seems that maybe if there's I don't know how much methodology that is interpreting them is embedded in the book, or is interpreting these diagrams or like maybe interpreting some kind of postmodern abstract art?
No, definitely it's not art. There are tools, there are instruments. They have instrumental capacity, generative capacity for sure. And the whole chapter is about methodology. There's a whole chapter about methodology. And within that chapter, cybernetics are the main science of all sciences. But at the same time, his models are not so cybernetic, not so, cybernetically connected. So it's kind of contradictory. And it's contradictory in a sense that, well, as I pointed out, cybernetics are here and then scientification, and we are right now here. So his time was already beyond cybernetics, even though he thinks that cybernetics are, the top system of thinking. So he's contradictory in his methodology, but yet there is very elaborate methodology.
Yeah, there is a question.
I was just going to ask how do you come across the book? Had you heard of it before?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. So I'm currently working in the Institute of Art History in Zagreb, and the institute was founded in 1961 by the state, and it has an archive. So our archivist one day just came to me and said, "Hey, Nikola, you might be interested in this stuff." Here is the stuff, archive material from my institution.
Well, if there are no more questions, let's thank Nikola for